All right. And 3, 2, 1. And there is a start, I'm sure. Yeah, the big one that says start. All right. Welcome, everyone. Today we are on another podcast of G Money, everything mortgages and real estate. And today I have a friend, Matt Kingsley, joining me. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, Greg. How are you doing?
No, I'm doing wonderful. So, little intro about Matt. We are sitting in my commercial building, which Mr. Matt assisted me in purchasing, and I don't think he knew what he was getting himself into with me as a client. Recently we had another podcast with Jason Ritchie from Mission Bank, and it was really eye-opening, for myself, but hopefully for others to really understand that my lane, my specialty is residential. Mm-hmm. And so it's, I'm that dangerous one where I think I know stuff about commercial, but I don't. And so I'll be honest, I'll throw it up. I don't know enough about commercial, so it's always nice. And this is why I enjoy chatting with Jason, chatting with yourself. It's always, I learn quite a bit. And this is, part of the podcast is I want to get this knowledge out there to others that, hey, maybe they want to get a crazy idea and purchase a building. So,
well, you've done an amazing job. I mean, it really is just a fabulous transformation.
Yeah, thank you. So, Matt, let's go way back, and then we'll get our story going. So, are you from Ventura? Where are you from?
So, my parents are from Ventura. Okay. Actually, they went to Buena High School together.
Oh, okay.
And, so longtime Venturans.
High school sweethearts.
Yeah, high school sweet. I think they were. I don't know all the. Yeah,
it sounds good. Absolutely. It's part of the story, so we'll say yes.
Yes, high school sweethearts, and they, ended up moving to Ireland, and that's where they had me. So,
really?
I was born here, but moved to Ireland when I was a baby. Yeah. Oh. So I grew up overseas. I'm an international kid.
How rad is that? I've been to Ireland. I love it.
I love it.
Yeah. Awesome. I wish I was from Ireland. Mom, Dad, what happened? Why didn't you go get me in Ireland? I don't know. All right.
But I did, I spent a few years back here. There's over in the Irish education system, they have this year called fourth year where you could basically take a year off. I mean, you can't take a year off, but it's an exploratory year. You go do an internship, you do different things. It's not so, I guess, rigorous academically.
Yeah.
And so I'd use that year to come back here, and I played Buena basketball, and I did went to the prom, learned to drive, which if you're growing up in Ireland, I mean, that was the years of, Hollywood, and there was no internet, so it was like, magazines and everything. So I was living the dream, writing letters back to my friends going, I'm going to the beach every weekend, learning to surf.
Oh, that's great. So at what point do you relocate to the States, and is it back to Ventura?
Yeah, I mean, I ended up going to university in Chicago area, and then my now wife was actually from this area. So it was a good place for us to kind of come back to. So after, university, I actually convinced my wife to move back to Ireland with me. We lived there for about 8-9 years, and then we came back here in 2013.
Before kids?
Nope, the kids came. we call them our blessings.
Okay, all right. All right, and how many kiddos do you have?
I got 2 kids. I got one who's in university. And,
okay.
It's at Cal State Northridge playing soccer.
Okay, wow.
And then I've got a junior in high school.
Okay. I know I've spoken to you and you've been at some tournaments. I didn't remember if it was soccer or baseball, Vegas somewhere. I don't know, these tournaments for these kids, these travel balls. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I know. Be careful what sports you put your kids into. I mean, that's a PSA notice right there, because you will become a fanatic.
Yeah, well, that's definitely, I'm learning from that. I spoke with my buddy the other day. I wanted to see him over the weekend, and we had plans, and then his son was playing in Sacramento for scouts were going to be there, and it was like, okay, another weekend chalked off. Yep. I guess we'll hang out again once the kids are graduated, but
pretty much.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't end. I mean, even this last weekend we were down in San Juan Capistrano for a game.
Oh my goodness. So fast forward me here. How do you go from you in Ireland with your wife? You have a couple kids. You get finally probably back to the Ventura area. How do you get into real estate? I mean,
so we were at a point of transition. We had some kind of health issues, which meant we wanted to be back kind of around family.
Sure.
And we were having to make those decisions of how do you know what's next. And thankfully, I had my best buddy. His dad was kind of took me under his wing, and the sad part of the story is that it was he had cancer, and wow. It was he knew it wasn't he wouldn't have a long road.
Sure,
but it was really nice of him to kind of lead me and guide me, and his name was Jim, and just family friend, but kind of guided me into commercial real estate.
And that's what I was going to ask. Was it instantly into the commercial, and you answered?
It was instantly into the Becker Group. I mean, he worked at the Becker Group, and at first you're just running. You're not making money. You're just showing up, and what can I do, boss?
Yeah. Well, I think that's. Yeah. I mean, especially coming from out of the country, where maybe you didn't have as many connections, and I can personally relate because I've been in mortgages, 23, 24 years, and 13 years ago I relocated to Ventura. Yeah, I knew one person. Yeah, and so is I knew I loved what I did and I was going to be successful. So how do you get out there and be successful? Is you have to keep busy every day. You're doing something. You're meeting somebody. You're volunteering, you're going to a happy hour, you're exploring somewhere new, you're meeting friends of friends. I mean, it was nonstop. And I look back and it feels like yesterday. It was such a blur. Yep. But so with that being said, you started with the Becker Group and you're still with them
Still
today.
With them. I mean, they were, at that point, you're basically a runner. You're just, fold some flyers, go hand things out. Yeah. Drop this thing off here.
Whatever support is needed.
Whatever I do. And then, I was getting my license at that time. And finally, once I got my license, I went back to, and Jeff, to his credit, Jeff Becker said he'd be willing to, I'd been around for about a year, just hanging around the office. Yeah. And, it was really nice. He brought me on, but it's not it's, as you know, it's a blessing and a curse, because they go, congratulations, you're hired. Now go do some deals.
right. That doesn't provide you a pay stub on day 1, 15, 30. I don't know. It takes a while to get going on that. And so, I've got to say, anybody that's listening to this, obviously in the Ventura area, knows the Becker Group, and especially Jeff. I was joking before we got started. I go, does Jeff own all of Ventura yet? I think not only what limited information I know is through you, and of course I've met him a few times, but not only are you guys a prominent commercial real estate company where buy and sell, but he also develops. And I think that's something where most other real estate groups don't do that. And so, he's buying, older commercial buildings downtown and refurbishing them, and does a beautiful job on all the projects that he does. So you get a lot more probably in depth of the knowledge, the experience, and all of that. You tell me what you've taken away with that dynamic.
Yeah, the firm's a little bit different than the brokerage firm is a little bit different than the big national groups. We're a small boutique commercial real estate and development agency. So we do the sales, the leasing. We do a lot of the normal things that a brokerage company will do. But like you're saying, we also, the company will do ground up developments, and I don't get to do a ton of it. I get to kind of sit on the sidelines and watch it. But some of the highlights would be the San Buena Hotel, which is about to open this summer. Or Waypoint. We've got the vintage trailers over there on the point over there.
Right.
So there's some kind of fun little things. A lot of the buildings downtown that you're going to walk by and you'll see that, oh wow, that that building looks really great. Well, some of them, not all of them, but some of them were Becker Group and projects that kind of got turned around. So
how cool is that? So, well, good. So I think, and even just kind of going back of how I initially met you, it was you and Sarah connected somehow. And I think, I don't know whether you were prospecting or you're just reaching out. I think you initiated to reach out to our office And from there, it was like, hey, this guy is nice. and you just somehow slid in to be our point of contact. And, one of the things that I'm really, I'm very impressed with you is any project, any building, anything that I bring up, you have the knowledge, and it's fascinating. And, maybe in the commercial side, I'm not aware of the comparable number of units, but it's just, the backstory, the contact. You're just very well studied in what your products are. And I'm very fascinated with that. And so good job to you.
Yeah. Well, I don't know who taught me this, and there were other agents as well. And it wasn't just Jim, but there's other agents at the Becker Group who, really mentored me along. And one of them said, "Hey, it's your job to know every landlord here. That's your job." And so I, took that to heart. So apologies to everybody for cold calling you and sending you letters, but that's part of what I pride myself on is getting to know people and walking the streets, knocking on doors, and seeing what people are out there doing.
Yeah. And with that, I mean, you're very well connected, and and when it was time for me of like, hey, I'm going to purchase something, and that you were the very first one I thought of because of your product knowledge. I knew if I could give you my wish list, you would find it, or you would know somebody, or you would tell me it wasn't available, but here's what we can do. And so, funny story. And we'll even talk about how do we come to acquire this money pit that we're sitting in now is, I had saved up some money and I was ready, and I felt like, it was kind of the next step for me, owning other residential properties. That commercial is just the next piece. And, with having my business, it was something that I wanted to, as I've done, I've built it out where it's not just a normal mortgage office or, just that office feel. We have a sound room, we have, kind of galley for different events. We have multimedia, we have sound. I mean, there's a lot of functions that we can do. And I think my vision in moving forward in business is not, just a whole bunch of desks and we just sit in here in cubicles. It's really having a functioning office that allows me to do exactly what I want. And I know it was back in 2018, I'd seen this building for sale, and it was the Avenue Hardware. Mm-hmm. And I saw it and, read the article that they were closing, and, they were a hardware store for 93 years. And, it was kind of like, man, that's cool. Mm-hmm. And it comes with a residential piece of property that's income producing. I'm like, man, that would be a dream. And at the time I was like, I followed it. I remember following it and watching it close escrow. And I was like, man, somebody got a really good deal on that. And then, a few years later, fast forward, I saw it come on the market again. And it was just right before I think I was ready, enough liquid assets there to proceed forward. And, I saw it come on the market. I saw it go into escrow, and then, hey, I'm ready to buy, and let's see what's on the market. So I gave you a call and I said, hey, Matt, I think I'm ready to buy. I don't know what's available. I want something similar to the Avenue Hardware. And you said, well, actually you might be in luck.
Yeah, I'm remembering this as you're saying it. Yeah. And it was like, I think it had just fallen out or something, right?
It was, I don't even think it had fallen out yet. But what was obviously nice is, again, the Becker Group, a prominent commercial real estate group, you had the listing. Mm-hmm. And so with that, you also had the insight, which is what you do. And so you said, let me call you right back. And so you kind of pried around a little bit, and you're like, okay, when do you want to go look at it? Now, please.
Yes, let's go get the car.
Yeah. So, I guess let's ask you. I mean, what do you think? Today is your first day that you've been in the building. I don't want to say it's finished, but the inside has definitely come a long ways from the gutted, empty warehouse, we'll call it, of sorts. I mean, did you have any idea or vision of what it would look like? And
well, I mean, obviously I knew it could be better than what it was, because it was in a rough,
that didn't take much.
It was in a pretty rough state when you jumped into it. But what you've done with it is beyond, I mean, as I said at the beginning, it's just, you've done an excellent job of kind of seeing a vision, being able to actually play that out. And I know it wasn't easy, but, I do take pride in the, being a little bit tiny part of that story of the,
you were a huge part. And, so. I'm sure I drove you nuts at points of, calling you frequently, and I really relied upon you. And I feel, with a realtor, there is some responsibility of your responsibility to make everything magically happen, but your knowledge is what I was trying to squeeze out of you, and direct traffic. Like, I know that I had so many questions of, okay, I'm going to buy this building, but can I even do what I want? Who do I talk to at the city? And again, your experience with the Becker Group, you had a contact and an email and a phone number, and it was like, again, directing traffic to guide me through the process. Financing was something else. And that's where, again, I don't, claim to get into trying to finance a vacant rundown building. And so, kind of asking for the referrals. I had a few contacts that, of course, I wanted to go reach out to, but I think you were a big hand in, hey, this is who can also get it done. And that has formed future relationships of, who I use today. And so that means a lot. And so, you had a much larger part, not just in the acquisition. Yes, I asked you until you were blue in the face of questions, but also kind of, you assisted me in so many different ways and still do. And so I appreciate that.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one of the things that I really enjoy about commercial real estate is that it's public, right?
Yeah.
Commercial real estate's public. And so it helps shape, our town. It helps shape our community. It helps, it leans into the culture, into the vibe of Ventura County,
sure,
and beyond. And so every time a property like this gets fixed up and gets turned around, it's not just, obviously it's for you guys, it's your investment, it's it's blood and sweat and all that, but it's also for the community, right? It's adding to the street, it's adding to the community at large beyond that.
Right.
So I just really appreciate what you guys are doing, and that's what gets me excited about commercial real estate.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I definitely see that, and this, not only was it a big leap of faith of purchasing something, expense-wise, but it was almost like a leap of faith because there was a blank check that was behind that of how much is this going to cost me to make improvements, because again, I'd never put in fire sprinklers. I don't know the codes on fire sprinklers, so there, thankfully everything has worked out and we're getting very close to the finish line. But again, as you mentioned, this is public in the sense that, on the west side, we are seeing, revitalization of a lot of older buildings. And, not that we're trying to change the neighborhood, we're just trying to be part of it and improve it. And so since I've been on the west side, I've jumped in, with our nonprofit, and we're, co-sponsoring different things. We're hosting events. Next week, we're doing financial literacy for the youth of the West Side over here. We do a lot of different projects. We've got some stuff going with the nonprofit bike hub across the street. I'm going to the council meetings. I've been more active than I ever thought I would. But it's also like there's a pride of ownership of I'm part of the West Side now too, and it's it feels good and having this building. A lot of people are curious what it is, and it's so funny too. Side note, everybody knew it as a hardware store, and once in a while we'll still get that occasional guy that'll walk in holding a nut and bolt, and he's like, "Oh wait, where's your bolt section?" I'm like, no, or they're like, "Yeah, I own the Avenue Hardware," and they're like, "Oh, cool. What's your business? What do you do with it?" And I'm like, "Mortgage," and they're like, "Oh, cool." But if they could only see it, we definitely, I'm proud of it, and we do a lot for the community.
Well, it was that place. It was the place you'd come in like, I haven't seen this in forever. I'll go to the Avenue, and by all recollections, the guy would look at it and go, "Oh, I think I got 4 of those."
Yeah.
Go find them.
And probably 2 months ago now, the old owner of the hardware store, Tad, he did stop in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I'm sure he was curious of what it was up to.
What were his thoughts?
He kept saying how beautiful it looked, but he was also very quiet. And I think a lot of that was he was taking it all in. You could just see his eyes, panning left and right and, where everything was going. And, a building that's almost 100 years old, I had a few questions for him of like, hey, on the ceiling over here that's 12 feet tall, what are all those scratch marks from? Like what was stored there that caused that? It was some pieces of metal that they were stored, and when they pulled them out, then it would kind of, but that patina of the wood over years of having that, it's character, and that's cool. I don't want to change that, and so I just wanted to have the backstory. We dang near got death threats when we took down the sign out front. And it was like multiple people came in. Where's that sign? I want that sign. One guy straight up told me, I almost stole that sign. I'm like, easy, buddy. Like, easy, And, again, it's part of the community that's been here for, almost 100 years. And, I feel honored and privileged to have the building, and, the improvements that we're doing. We're trying to pay homage to that and treat it respectfully. We had one lady that purchased, when he was closing, some family portraits. And so she bought them at this garage sale here and brought them back to us. And she's like, I just want to keep it with the building. And so I've got these unique family portraits that I'm going to hang them somewhere, like, awesome. Heck yeah, why not? Yeah. So
very cool.
Yeah. So I know we've talked a lot about this building. Let's just talk commercial in general. The thing that I kind of forget too is, it's not just the sales part. That, that's what I relate to as residential, just the sales and, of course, refinances. Yeah. But you also deal with leasing, which we do not. So do you find that there's an equal balance, or you do more sales versus leasing? How do you feel that kind of plays out?
Yeah, it's different year to year. For whatever reason this year, I'm sure interest rates are part of that reason, but we've been doing more leasing I would say in the last 6 months or so. And leasing of all kinds. It is funny, we talk about commercial real estate, but that's a pretty broad brush, right?
Sure.
That goes from hotels to restaurants to stores to industrial to multifamily.
Yeah.
It's a office. So yeah. But so in terms of leasing, yeah, I would say we're doing more leasing right now than sales, but we'll see. Is there something specific you wanted to know about the leasing side?
I'm just, again, it's something I don't regularly, work with. And so I just wasn't sure. And I do know that, there's, much like we do, there's commissions and payouts on that kind of stuff. I'm just so distant from, let's say, a property management company. So I don't know all of that, and just kind of curious. And, also I'm seeing,
how does the process work, or how does the,
well, yeah, let's yeah. Why don't you share about leasing?
I guess, it's like, we'll get a call. Maybe the call's for, somebody, they need, a 5,000 square foot, industrial building or office building.
Yeah.
So for us, we kind of know the market, like you were saying, but you kind of have to narrow that down. In residential, there's a ton of product in comparison to the available product in commercial. And then in each of those, because we have all these different segments, if you're like, I need a 1,500 square foot office, and you might look around and go, look, there's tons of office available, but in the 1,500 square feet with, 3 private offices, or,
sure.
There might only be 3 options.
Right.
Depending on your zone.
Yeah.
So we really have to kind of narrow down, what are your objectives? What are you guys trying to do? What are your absolute must-haves? And then we kind of were able to whittle that down and, find a location. So.
And then if you're representing the lessor, so the building owner, they pay you like a one-time fee for getting somebody in. Is it any way connected to the terms if they sign a 3-year lease or 5-year?
So usually what will happen is a landlord will hire a group. It's either the Becker Group or another commercial agent to put it out to the market. Help me find a tenant. And sometimes the agent will represent both the landlord and the tenant, but oftentimes they won't. It'll be somebody bringing, so maybe that person that's looking for 1,500 square feet, I bring them to a building that we don't represent. Mm-hmm. The commission, the guy that's representing the landlord will have signed a listing agreement, and usually that listing agreement has a commission that gets split. And
Gotcha.
So if it's a 3-year lease, you'll get paid on the full value of those 3 years, and usually there's increases every year, but depending on how much it is, you'll get paid a commission once everything's signed and once they're in the building and good to go.
Gotcha. And then again, with this sales, I think I'm more familiar with that, and so looking around, I see kind of this, as you said, there's a lot of different types of commercial products. And I see a huge dichotomy of to me, one side is thriving and one side is maybe not. Like, for example, and I'm fumbling for my words to properly, describe it here. I go down certain parts of Main Street where, kind of the midtown section where it was historically a lot of retail. Mm-hmm. And I see a lot of vacant buildings and a lot of just... not much there. They don't look the best. Occasionally you'll see a great building and, this and that. But then I see other sides where it's I think a lot of restaurants are popular. A lot of industrial stuff is popular. Yeah. Where are the thriving aspects of the commercial and what's really starving or hurting?
Multifamily is thriving. I'm sure that's part of your world. Yeah. Industrial's thriving. They're still doing strong. And I think part of the reason industrial is doing so well is kind of a result of COVID. If you were a retail user and you were already battling Amazon, then COVID kind of coming in was the major litmus test. Do I really need a retail location, or oh my goodness, I can do the same amount of business, but I don't have to have as many retail staff. I don't have to pay the retail rental rates, which are tend to be higher than industrial. So supply demand, that's put a lot more pressure onto the available. So, I think our vacancy rates right now for Ventura County and industrial are between 3% and 4%. So you think about all the industrial properties, 96, 97% of it is leased out.
Yeah. Wow. That's a crazy rate to hear. And then do you specialize in the city of Ventura and in surroundings, or do you do I know if you're in Ventura, you kind of got to do Oxnard and Camarillo to an extent. But what's your footprint that you typically cover? So
we've done deals. We're doing deals in Santa Barbara. We've done deals down. I've done deals all the way down to LA. But in general, kind of our general day to day where we spend our time is kind of Simi Valley is the edges, Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, and then up to Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
But I try personally. I love Ventura. I live here. My kids go to or went to both kids used to go to school here.
Yeah, sure.
So it's definitely I got a soft spot in my heart for Ventura.
Yeah, as do I. Yep. So with that, and again, I've kind of touted your knowledge of buildings. Tell us all maybe share some hints of some of the projects you guys have going, or even if it's not your projects, what's some of the cool stuff that's coming into Ventura soon?
Well, I mentioned the hotel. I haven't been, too active in the, development of that. I've just kind of been able to sit in the sidelines and watch it. But it's, actually Conservancy just did a tour last week, and it's absolutely beautiful. They've everything from little elk's heads on the bathroom.
It was an old
sinks.
Elks Lodge, correct?
It was an old Elks Lodge, and then they built a brand new building next to it with the parking structure. And so Ventura doesn't really have I would say high end hotel. It's got fine hotels, but not the I'd say something to rival Santa Barbara and maybe Ojai. And so this is kind of
so this is going to be a high end
boutique. Yeah, that's nice. And it's got an amazing meeting space that was the old Elks meeting space up there. So very cool.
And where exactly is this?
This is downtown. Just outside of downtown on the corner of Ash and Main.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And how many rooms do you have any idea?
I think we're 32. I need to double check that, but Don't hold me to 32.
And roughly when is that opening? Just curious.
I wish I could tell you tomorrow, but yeah, it's going to be, this summer is the target.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. What else you guys got your hands in?
So one of the other projects that's been a kind of a long project is the old Gasworks building. It's over there next to, I don't know if you know the Topper's Pizza and Jiffy Lube in downtown Ventura. So kind of across the street from that, we have it's the old used to be where the gas company would operate out of. Really cool brick buildings. I
know exactly where it is.
Steve's Plumbing's there.
Correct, next door.
Yeah, and so it's been a really cool project. Basically it's going to be a mixture of restaurants, retail, some office. So it'll be a really cool mixed commercial use, and obviously a great parking lot.
Yeah. I saw the parking lot recently being done as I'm across the street at one of your other buildings, Transmission Brewery, and enjoying some pizza and beers, of course. Yeah. That's a really cool building.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about it. It's one of those things that's going to be just because a lot of the old character's still there. You have this, an internal metal mezzanine, kind of industrial features. Wow. That will translate well to, I think, creative office or boutique retail. Yeah.
Any new restaurants coming? Any other entertainment stuff?
There are. I can't tell you all the ink because we have to wait till the ink's dry and everything's done till it's done.
Got it. A little premature. Yeah. We just can't say it on the air. I got it.
But there's going to be some really fun additions to the area. So.
Good. And that's, it's nice. I feel like downtown is, for the most part, I feel thriving. Every time I go down there's a lot going on, and it's nice to have everybody outdoors. We have such beautiful weather here, year round, to be able to take advantage of that. And one of the newer things I've been doing, we do little date nights with my wife, and we jump on our little scooters. We'll come here and we'll scooter all over because we can cover kind of a wide footprint and, kind of.
What kind of scooter do you use?
I got a Segway.
A Segway, yeah. I was looking at one of those. My wife has I used to have one, but then my son, when he went to college, he's like, my dorm's over here, my classes are way over there.
Oh, got it.
So he took the scooter. So I've been meaning to, but my wife was like, Matt, you got to get another one because for that reason, we would do it. It's so much fun, It's like
it is, and I purposely bought them for this building in mind because being here on the west side, there is so many things. It is hustling and bustling. And the amount of food and food options and just like what's over here, people are everywhere, and so my thought process was like, hey, if I want to go zip down to the store over here or go have quick lunch, we can just jump on our scooters. Parking is difficult over here on the avenue. And so, having a little scooter that you can pull up and electronically lock it, then, that was kind of my thought. And of course, I can't do anything just like the cheap one. I've got to get the good one. And so Segway, I was on there actually because I'm interested in potentially buying more. Because then I'm like, it's tough. A friend comes over, or my kids are growing, and I'm like, it'd be nice to have some friend ones. And so I was on their website yesterday. They have like 30 different scooter options. Oh, wow. And a lot of the electric, like anything, it all comes down to the features. The distance with the battery pack. The one that I got, it'll go like up to 40 miles, which that covers some ground. You can go all over the place without needing a charge. It has a light on there, LED headlight, which is, very nice. I've used that at nighttime. And you can lock it. There's the iPhone app where you can lock it. And, hey, I'm not over here working for Segway, but I'm just saying, like, I
was going to ask how your stock options are going. But
well, I'm trying to get them as a little commercial over here. Right. Segway, if you're listening, I'm promoting your product, and I'd like a couple more scooters, please. But they're very fun. They work very well. And I'll let you take it for a test spin.
Okay. Yeah.
So... Yeah, and then, kind of back in this, you're a commercial realtor, so, chat with me. What's, a day in the life with Matt? Is it, from generating business, have you established yourself enough that you get enough repeat and referral phone calls? Are you still out pounding sand and, knocking on doors and calling? And
I think the easy answer is yes and yes. I mean, I don't think that, you should ever be too resting in your laurels to go, the phone's always going to ring, or anything. The phone does ring, and we're happy to help anyone who calls and go that way. But we don't stop making, cold calls. And, half my job is I'll be driving by, out driving past a property, just like probably you do. And I go, that's, there's some activity or inactivity going on there. And, you make the phone call and you're, off to the races, and sometimes there's something happening, sometimes there's not, or you have a property and it's, got a vacancy and you're trying to find the right tenant for it. And you're going, this would be a great place for an ice cream shop, or, who are all the ice cream shops in town, right? So you're out cold calling, you're making those, sometimes they're, they're not uncomfortable calls to me now, but I think that a lot of people, find cold calling uncomfortable. But I actually just really enjoy getting to know, because sometimes it's just people have legitimate needs, and they're so grateful that somebody was like, oh, hey, I was wondering what to do with that building, or oh yeah, we have been looking for the right location, and why do you think this your property is going to be the right spot?
And in that aspect, I've had realtors cold call me, just as a homeowner, where they look up your information. And then I've also, including, I think I shared last week, I had a cold call from a commercial realtor. And I think on the commercial side, maybe it was more invitational on my end. I felt, I don't know why I wasn't as on guard, but it's like, I think, as you said, maybe you're more flattered of they're looking for something potentially that you have. And you're like, well, thank you. Maybe it is a nice building, and you did see my improvements that are gone into it. I don't know, but
and there's something, obviously commercial, owning a home is an investment as well, but there's something very investment oriented about commercial real estate. And so I think because of that, investors, people who are investing in commercial real estate, they're always looking for, well, is there a way that I could do more with my asset, right? So I think there's probably that, disposition to the call, when they went, oh, well, I didn't know that there was a demand out there for, these old funky buildings or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, again, my limited interaction with commercial is purchasing here. And I felt like, just like anything, once you get your feet wet, they say, it makes it easier to get back in. Do you find that most of your clients, that's what they specialize in, and that's what they do, is they just, they don't own one commercial building, they own 10 or 20. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you find that kind of more of a pattern than just the isolated, we own one building?
Yeah, I mean, I won't get into specifics about any of our clients, but,
sure.
In general, we have clients that are, that are like that, where they own multiple properties and they trust us to go out and find another property. I mean, I don't know if you talked about 1031 exchanges on this,
No, share. Before, I'm sure I have, but it's always good to just remind and, share what a 1031 is.
Yeah, 1031 it's the ability to trade asset for asset, and so for a lot of investors that makes sense. You might be able to, I guess if you look at a generalized plan for somebody comes to you and say, I got $1 million, $2 million, and we need to start doing some investment work. Well, as you look out that and you stretch out that strategy, that might be, okay, well, we're going to go, buy a building that needs some work. We're going to need some capital to put into that building. Then we're going to go and we're going to, find new tenants for that property that, adding value to the community, adding value to the building and to the property owner. And then that sometimes that property owner will hold on to it, but sometimes they will choose to sell it. And so when they go to sell, whatever their capital gains is would normally be taxed. But instead, you can say, well, I'm going to wait to get taxed on that till later down the road, and I'll take that investment. And there's very strict guidelines, and you need to talk to, an exchange officer about those, the dates. And I think they're a little bit longer right now because we're in a, emergency status, disaster status. But yeah, there's very strict guidelines on the timing, and you have to go find another property that it doesn't have to be the exact. If you sold industrial, you don't have to buy an industrial. It could be another property. It could be a house, but it has to be for investment purposes. And but yeah, there's the 1031, and you get to defer your taxes. You're not avoiding taxes. I want to be very clear.
Right. Yeah, if you sell a building for $1 million, you never touch the money. It has to sit in this third party intermediary.
Yep.
And then they roll that into the next property.
Yep.
And so, you're typically buying up. You're buying a $2 million property or 1.5. And so it puts it towards that. And so that's where it, as you said, kind of kicks the taxes down the road of whenever you want to cash out, and that's when it would become taxable.
Exactly. Correct. Yeah. But it's a great instrument, and what it allows for people. I think people, oftentimes look at that and they go, oh, just the wealthy, not paying their fair share. And, I understand the criticisms, but on the positive side, it also incentivizes people to invest, and people invest in their community, people to make properties better. The same people that maybe would criticize that, avoiding taxes are going to drive down and go, why does that building look so bad? Why is that, why is there nothing happening over here? Why are things, why is there no investment going into my community? Right. Well, this is one of the ways. I mean, there's many other ways as well, and taxes are one of those ways. Yeah. But 1031 does incentivize, people to make those investments and to go, oh, I've got, I can add some value into this community. So.
Right. Yeah. And, as the investor, you want your money to work for you. And so, just because you own a building doesn't mean it's necessarily cash flowing or returning on your investment. No.
And it's a risk, like all investments. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, recently, one of my friends, he purchased a mixed use property, and I hadn't seen this before. I'm familiar with on the PCOR, the preliminary change of ownership report for the county. Whenever something's recorded, they want to look at it and say, what's the use? Is it investment? Is it primary? Mm-hmm. For a lot of taxable reasons. But they literally sent him, he has it's a market, there's some residential. They wanted to get down into the weeds of the lease amounts and how much they were and when they originate. Have you seen that from the county assessor before?
I'd have to check. I mean, I don't know if that's a new thing or, but no,
I called the county. There was a contact with the letter, and I'm, as I'm trying to help my friend here, I'm, well, how much do we need to divulge? What do they need to get into the weeds? Because, really my understanding was it's taxable on the value of the property, but are they trying to get into the cash flow valuation as well? I didn't know. And
I have no idea. Sure it's kind of the first time I'm hearing about it. So
you dealt with that. Well, be on the lookout, Ventura County. They're looking for additional revenue here for us. So just kidding. We were only joking. So any other projects that are coming or just cool buildings, anything up for sale that maybe we should know about?
Yeah, I mean we're selling right now 1299 Wells Road, which is kind of a cool property. That's the old you've probably seen if you're heading out in Satakoy. It's that large wooden building, almost looks like a barn as you turn off of the telephone. Yeah. And it's I mean I always love the building because I would drive down Wells coming off Foothill, and you'd go what is that massive structure in there? But it's an almost 100-year-old, redwood building. Yeah.
And what is it being used as anything right now or vacant? Or?
Yeah. There's some tenants in place, but yeah, there's opportunity for, we're also subleasing it for, the tenant doesn't want to be there anymore. So we've got it on the market for sublease as well. But yeah, no, I personally, I just like the building. It's got a lot of cool, features and a lot of history, to it too. It's got the old where there used to be, rail lines, and back when we were a little, it was an old packing house. So it's got all the sliding doors and things like that. Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. A lot of those old kind of features, character.
Anything else similar to, we get a lot of inquiries on our building, anything like this, mixed use, even down here on the avenue or?
I wish we had more mixed use. I think that it's a category that, there's a lot of demand for. People that would like to live where they work, or they'd have to have the multiple asset. They'd say, oh, I can have live, rent upstairs and have a tenant and maybe do a coffee shop down below. So I've always got. Had somebody call me the other day asking, is there a live work property that I can I forget if they were trying to do a cafe or a bakery, but they had some kind of restaurant food use that they really wanted to do, and they wanted just to be able to live close by because it was going to be such a part of their lives. But yeah, no, we don't have a ton of this live work.
I do see a little bit of that. I know that there's some on Victoria out there in Oxnard. Isn't there? Before you get to the harbor, it's down like not as far as Channel Islands. Hemlock. Do you know where Hemlock is? Mm-hmm. I think over there on the right-hand side.
They did some of that, yeah.
And I'm just kind of curious how that works out. I think there's also some in the Ventura, off of Spinnaker in the Ventura Harbor. Is there not in some of those?
I don't know. I actually don't know about those. Those the new ones. You're talking the new port side development. Yeah.
And then, do you know anything about the Wagon Wheel out in Oxnard? Because I know they just opened a brewery. Did they open a brewery there?
Yeah, there's a cool brewery. I mean, I guess when we're talking mixed, I'm talking about.
You live upstairs. I understand that.
Yeah, one. But yeah, you're right. Those are mixed developments in the sense that you got the commercial right down below, and residential above. Yeah.
The few that I did name, I'm pretty sure that they do have it where you live above where you have the workspace, and so I'm just kind of curious at how that works out. Also, naming where they are, the location. Is it financially advantageous to have a live workspace on the water? I mean, unless you're an artist or something that does some Van Gogh work, that's got to be pretty pricey versus, just being in a normal residential area. So I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, I would say that it's just, there's a demand for it. I get calls for, people wanting to, sometimes they're artists, but sometimes they're, not. They're just, it's an insurance guy who wants to be close to, he doesn't want the commute or doesn't want to spend 2 mortgages.
Well, I think what's really cool, and I think there's more of a need, is like they're on Front Street by the Transmission Brewery where they have, you don't live, but they have like these little work industrial units. They're so cool looking, and that's why it comes to mind. And they're also what I feel, a good size, where you're not probably making furniture company here, but you can do a production of some sort, and it's the right size. And so I know that there's a good demand for that. I wish there was more of that, even out here pushed off the avenue, or further down the avenue where there is space for that. I wish somebody would develop some of those things.
We'll stick it on the list.
There you go. And I know you're a realtor, and I'm a lender, and so I don't want to, especially as I do transactions, I always like where people kind of stay in their lane. But it's also good knowledge. How do you feel like commercial is different? And these are going to be just general questions, probably what pertains to your transactions, but. When I look at, again, residential lending, we have agencies, whether it's Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, whether we have FHA, they all publish and make these guidelines, and they make it available so that it is achievable. But it's also, if you go to XYZ Bank or ZXY or ZZZ Bank, they're all playing even playing field with the same guidelines. And what I quickly learned in commercial, I mean, most of them, they're underwriting their own guidelines. So it varies bank by bank. I mean, is that true? I mean, do you truly feel that?
Yeah, I mean, every bank, has their kind of, I don't know. I mean, there are guidelines as well for commercial. I don't want to make it sound like it's the Wild West for commercial
there's
banks,
very strict. It's to me, I'll compare it to like HELOCs or second mortgages. It's for very qualified buyers, but when you're a very qualified, and what do you mean by that? A good income, a low debt ratio, and good capital, right? Yep. You're putting down in commercial, you're not putting down 3% or 5%. No. It's most of the time 30 to 35% at minimum to whoever gets to that debt service ratio. But again, just my experience of working with a few different banks on the commercial side, they look at your scope of your project, and I guess looking back of having a vacant building, I can see that there is risk in that. And especially, a lot of people don't finish what they're started, but does that impact you on the sales side? And, do you have it where there's properties that are just not lendable, or do you find, hey, if the borrower has enough money, anything can get done?
Well, I mean, obviously, if the borrower has enough money, anything can.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I'm saying with financing, not just paying for it cash and doing everything.
Every bank is different. I think that's why relationships are really important.
Sure.
You kind of get it pretty quick. You can figure out, okay, my property has a lot of deferred maintenance. It's going to take a sophisticated buyer to buy this, or they're going to need to come in with a construction plan to bring this up to standards or better.
Yeah.
And so that has to be part of the the underwriting process. I don't know,
Yeah. And I'm not quoting you as a lender. I'm more on the sales side. Like, have you lost deals because they couldn't, get the financing in place, or is there?
Or I mean, I don't know if we've lost any, but it's been bumps in the road and things you had to negotiate, because you might have a lender where everything's fine. I remember I was representing the seller, and the buyer thought they were fine, and they were moving forward with their one lender, and then their one lender came back, and and I guess maybe this is a reason. I mean, the big banks and big lenders can loan money as well, but I think smaller banks, one of the benefits of them, especially if they're local to you, is that they know your market.
Right.
So a lot of those guys can kind of look at the intricacies of a like a unique property like this.
Sure.
It took probably a local lender to know. Oh, we kind of know what's going on in the avenue. We've lent to your neighbors. We know they have a little bit more understanding than maybe a bigger bank that might look at this and go, too much work needs to be done. We're not too sure, so they might just pass on it. I mean, and I'm not saying that they would or they wouldn't, but
right.
There's some value, I think, in there for kind of the smaller local banks.
And I'm always along, for several reasons, supporting local. I mean, obviously the money stays local, but for that very reason of, even though, let's just say in the residential where I have guidelines that I have to adhere to, I've had it many times, including recently. I just closed a property where, the listing side is telling me what this property needs and the condition. And I've kind of like scratched my head, and I'm like, you know what? I'd like to go look at this property. And I literally have, and I've gone out to the property and I've walked it because, we have to get appraisals completed, and I know what that appraiser's looking for. And so I was like, prior to the appraisal, I need this done, this done, this done. And actually, there's been 2 of those scenarios recently where I've done that, and we've closed both of those without hiccup. And so it is nice to know the area, to kind of be able to be there, but also know. And I think, when I was consulting in financing for the commercial property, I wanted local for somebody that knew the awareness of our footprint, of us, myself as a local lender, and the strength that I had, but also the building, the neighborhood, and just kind of see the whole idea and the game plan, and understand that not somebody back in Delaware saying, "Where's this Ventura, California?" Whatever their accent is. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Delaware.
Yeah, sorry, Delaware. Wherever you were. And I think that means a lot. I was just kind of curious of, and again, you've got to have multiple lenders that you work with, and how challenging that was without having just at least some. I guess there is some unwritten standardized goals, right? You need to have pretty decent credit, and you got to have at least this much down, but it all has to debt service, so there's similarities in there, but there's also different credit risks and different underwriters that, are stricter than others. And I felt that firsthand. I mean, I'm speaking for my own where.
And in fairness, you don't want to go with the some people are just like, oh, these guys will lend to anybody. And I don't know if there's any of those banks anymore, but but that's not really should be the driving factor. You do want to make sure that that you're not getting yourself in over your head too. It's kind of it's a win-win process when you go through the underwriting and hey, I've been honest up front. Here's my income. Here's what's going on.
Yeah.
To be able to go through that process actually gives you a little bit of sense of, because it is a big risk as you're stepping into this, and you're going, can I cash flow this? Do I have what it takes? And so that's a great, kind of reassurance when you go through a strict underwriting process to know that, hey, it's not even just me. It's not a dream.
Yeah.
There's some tangible people, and I've got some risk assessments coming in that are
that is good.
Encouraging you.
You're right. Good validation that the choice that you're making is doable. And, again, as we first were chatting before we got on the microphones, it was, talking about the numbers of the building and how well it does, that's something to be said of, out of pocket, it's cost a lot in improvements, but the equity that we have and the cash flow that we have, it's definitely doing well. And it's been a great asset for me, and I'm glad I own it. And, I'm looking forward to even the future of more and more things that we do with it. But, as I look into retirement, this is an asset that at some point, hey, I made cash flow, or 1031 this into 10 units or 12 units, and go find something that works a little bit different. But for now, it's doing great. Cool. So
well, and I mean, you guys didn't use it, but there is also the SBA program, which is out there, which I'm sure you've talked about before as well. But it's as close as we get to the first time
the
buyer.
Low down payment. I'm going to have Jason Ritchie. He was on here from Mission Bank. I'm going to have him back. He did help one of my friends with an SBA loan purchase, and my understanding is the bank does like a 60 or 65% loan, and then the Small Business Administration SBA, they fill in the other part of that up to like. Is it 30%? Do you know? Do they go up?
I think they go more. Yeah, but I mean, again, talk to Richie on it.
Right.
But the nice thing about that from a bank's perspective is they're reducing risk and able to be a little bit not aggressive, but able to go say, hey, we can take on, because our risk is only 60% or 65 or whatever that is. So, yeah.
No, and it helps. I mean, my friend that I referred, he was able to, for his retail business, he was able to purchase something, and it works great for him. And without the SBA, that wouldn't be, readily available.
And there's different types of SBAs too. I mean, Jason will talk your ear off on it, but what I like about it from the helping people buy properties is it's as close as we get to that first time buyer. And when you're trying to help somebody realize like, hey, what's my, can I afford this? Can I buy this? Well, it's just one more, tool, that you can kind of point them to say the SBA may make sense for you. And maybe you prefer to get to the 30% down and, go about it that route. But there are, some advantages obviously to jumping in and getting involved in real estate. So.
Yeah. And then, just kind of reflecting back on my purchase, in the process of you representing, I know once we got our offer accepted, we did different inspections, and you had a great inspector that you recommended that, he not only inspected the commercial property, but he did the residential. I don't know. My situation may be so simple because, the commercial side was so gutted at the time, but are there other inspections in commercial that you frequently do that maybe we didn't do or that are recommended?
Well, usually what we'll have is the general property inspection. And again, it depends on what type, right? I mean, if you have maybe you got a cooling facility. Well, the first call is going to be to the cooling specialist contractor.
Yeah,
right? So, I mean, it slightly depends on the type of property that you're inspecting. Sure. But if it's like a general retail, you got a retail residential, then you usually will start with that property inspection, and then you'll go, system by system. And so out of that will come recommendations, whether it be for the electrical, for the roof, for the, termites, for the plumbing, and in the city of Ventura, you're required to, the seller has to provide a sewer lateral inspection,
right.
For most properties.
Yep.
And so you can see from there, but that doesn't cover whatever's going on internally. So you look at those things, and but yeah, those are kind of inspections, and then obviously you look at the what you're trying to do. And for example, you were looking at doing some major construction when you bought this property, so that's another element. You'd say, okay, well, have you talked to your contractor? Have they given you advice on what it's going to take to get this to where you see it being? Having those kind of inspections in a sense, done as well are important. So, but yeah, I mean, a lot of the stuff is going to be the same: termites and roof, and or the CFI plugs working right or whatever.
Right.
But there are, I think in commercial, it's you do have some specific things, maybe ADA compliance and those type of things that are going to come in.
Yeah. and I again, because my property was so, I don't know, vacant, abandoned, desolate, I don't know, it was just gutted. Then, we just did kind of the structure. It was really the bare bones to make sure that the structure was sufficient. So that aspect was pretty easy. The appraisals on commercial, and again, I know you're not a lender, and I'm just asking, because there's a realtor side and there's a lender side. Yeah. Do you typically get involved, like when it's time for inspection? Are you there? Do you have to, the residential, first and foremost, they're looking for value. Mm-hmm. And so there's different ways, we've discussed different ways of value. There's a sales comparison approach. There's a cost approach. Yep. There's a cash flow approach. There's different ways to value something, but that's their first and foremost job. And then the secondary in residential anyways, is they're our boots on the ground. So we're asking them of like, hey, can you, see if there's any health and safety issues? Not saying you're a contractor, but mm-hmm. do you see any exposed wires, any holes in the wall, anything that we need to necessarily be concerned with?
From the lending side, yeah.
From the lending side. As a realtor, when you're going to list a property, is there stuff, kind of the same sense, like do you walk it with a seller and look for things, or is it just a lot looser and not necessary? I don't know.
No, you're as an agent, you want to find if there's issues with the property, you want to know them. You want to advise your client about them, whether they be on the sales side or the buy side. But obviously, my experience is limited, and so if it's something that you go. There might be environmental inspection. Banks these days are going to require environmental, inspections. One of those is a phase 1. They'll do a phase 1 environmental. If a phase 1 requires a phase 2 where they actually take samples, Right. Phase 1 tends to be just more records and, looking at the historical uses.
And we did have that. I recall that now.
Yeah, we did. But it's, in terms of what's the responsibility of the real estate agent. Yeah, we're, if we were to walk by and see a big beam that's tilted and you're going, hey, I should bring that up to someone's attention, absolutely.
Well, in residential, and again, I'm only relating, and maybe this is like, again, where my lane is, I look at residential lending and there's like, forms that are required, the SPI, seller property inspection.
That's right.
And then there's like the realtor has one where they're supposed to, the AVID, the agent visual inspection disclosure, where they're required. Do they have any of those required forms in the commercial?
We don't fill out an AVID form. That doesn't, negate us from our having diligence, to do, doing due diligence. But what we use an AIR form. I think that most of those are, the AVID things. I believe that's part of the CAR form.
Yes.
California Association of Realtors. And so we tend to use an AIR form. There's also other, sometimes the purchase agreement will just be a,
BevNap.
but or generated by an attorney or somebody. So they're different forms, but I would say the majority of transactions that we do are, I would say, 90% plus are on these AIR forms,
right?
And they have their own disclosure forms that you'd fill out, property information sheets and seller mandatory disclosures and things like that too. So there are disclosures. I don't make it sound like going to commercial. There's no.
I get it. It's just different forms, different disclosures, and so that's what I was curious about. So now. With that, I know we've been going here a little bit. We've covered from leasing to sales to some of the properties you guys are working on. Is there anything I've left out that you wanted to share with us?
Well, I just want to say thanks for having me on. I appreciate it, Greg. This is I was as I said before, I think the last time I sat down with headphones on and a microphone was back in college when I was running the student radio station, and the only time slot they would give me was from like 11 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Well, I was bringing you back, helping you relive some of your old college days.
That's right.
Well, you got a pretty good little radio voice, so
Call me Smooth, Mr. Smooth.
I love it. Well, thank you again for being on. This is Matt Kingsley with the Becker Group. How can they find you, Matt?
You can find go to beckergrp.com. That's our website, and all our details are on there. So happy to assist you guys, and if there's any questions, or if you're wondering, can I open a place? Can I sell a building? Happy to help out in anything. And obviously, we just got questions and want to chat. I'm always free for a coffee too.
And here's my challenge. If you have a question about a building for sale or lease, call Matt. If he doesn't know the inside scoop, I'll buy you a drink. I promise you, he knows what's going on. So, all right, guys, thanks again for joining us on another episode of G Money, everything mortgages, real talk, everything mortgages and real estate. Catch us next time. Talk to you soon. Take care.